Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Merkel. Welcome to Sports Stories, the podcast. This Sports Catered podcast will discuss different stories that we as humans have experience in, with, and through sports. Hopefully, providing context to the following questions. What makes sports so special? And how do sports impact us as humans? I'll dive headfirst into these questions through some critical conversations with a wide variety of guests on the show. With my current background in research and academia, I'll be looking to bridge the gap between practicality and research. I truly hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for another episode of Sports Stories, the podcast. I'm really excited for this episode. I am joined by Ella Chan, the COO of Pedalheads, a sport recreation-based company out of British Columbia, Canada. Ella, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to sort of kick off this episode and just asking about your story and where you're at right now and sort of how you got to that place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's terribly exciting. I'm an arts kid. So I actually started off studying theater in Toronto at the University of Toronto. I worked and lived in Toronto in theater. And in the arts for several years, I think like around 8+ years, and then eventually wanted to make my way home to Vancouver. I did at some point, as you do when you work in the arts, I was like a bit of a starving artist. And so I worked in restaurants quite a bit, and then eventually started working in the back end of restaurants. Back in the day, restaurants handled a lot of cash. It's not as much credit card as it is these days. And so they really often needed somebody in the back doing basically like cash outs, accounting, basic administration. I found it really fun. Somehow that transitioned me into doing more on the numbers side for restaurants. I eventually moved over into a larger restaurant group as a junior accountant. Somehow I went from being like an actor to an accountant through that phase because that company that I worked for, Joey Restaurant Group, basically put me through my CMA, and I got my CPA from it. As I started to do that, I really found a love for it. I found a love for management accounting, which is really like, how do you make the numbers really usable for operations? Because I was an operator really at heart, where I liked to be on the ground. I liked to be doing work that related to actually being with customers or near customers or in proximity of other operators who worked with customers. And then a unique opportunity came up with the Vancouver Canucks. So the Canucks ownership group owned the team and the arena, but for years, the party that ran the food and beverage business at the arena was a third party. That's pretty common across arenas and stadiums. It's a big beast to take over the F&B in a building, but it is also one of the biggest connectors between the fans and the overall experience. You think about all the times you go to a stadium and want to buy a beer, get a hot dog, you'd be amazed like how many transactions have to happen and how a positive interaction with food and beverage can really enhance your night and how a negative one can ruin it. So the Canucks decided to take the food and beverage business in-house. So they moved out the third-party operator, which meant they needed a whole new team of corporate staff to be able to run that. So then I had an opportunity to take my food and beverage numbers knowledge into a sports organization and a very well-known brand. So I, with a team of individuals, helped to launch the food and beverage business at Rogers Arena. And I spent 8 years there and eventually shifted around. I was on the finance team for a long time. And then, because I'm a heavily like operations driven finance individual, I was always involved in the ops. Eventually started doing finance and operations, eventually moved into being the vice president of hospitality for that organization. And then after a while, a recruiter reached out and said that there was a COO position at a local locally owned business called Pedalheads. And I met with the owner, Claudia, and it just seemed like a perfect next step and great fit for me. So that's my three
Wow.
minute life story of my
That's a
career.
that's a wonderful elevator 3 minute elevator pitch there. That's really cool. I really like that story. That's really interesting how you sort of like just transitioned through life of working in the restaurant, and then you went back house restaurant, and then from back house restaurant to, you said, Joey Foods, and then this opportunity with the Canucks came up, and you mentioned yeah, you'd be surprised how many transactions have to go in place in order for food and bev to operate.
Yeah.
And this is slightly connected, but it made me think about, I'm originally from St. Louis, which is the baseball team there is the Cardinals, and they're
Yeah.
really not doing too well right now. And one thing that they've done to entice fans is a $20 all you can eat ticket, with
Oh,
like hot
wow.
dogs. It's like hot dogs, a cup of beer, a
Yeah.
burger, a pretzel, stuff like that. And it made me think of like, okay, well, what's the logistics of that? Like how
Yeah.
much food needs to be purchased
A
for 20
lot.
bucks to make sense?
So much
Like,
food.
yeah, I could not imagine like what that looks like. Maybe it's like Costco in a sense, where
Yeah.
the business takes a hit on their hot dogs in order to make money somewhere else. And so like,
You'd be surprised actually on the profitability of food and beverage. And I think it
really.
varies, right? Because it
Hmm.
varies depending on your cost of goods. Cost of goods are really expensive in Canada. And then even between provinces, like so buying a beer in Alberta is very differently priced and taxed as a beer in British Columbia. So it can be complicated, but it can be very profitable.
Yeah.
There's also a really interesting model when it comes to these third parties because the third parties have to make money,
Hmm.
and the arena has to get a cut. And so
Yeah.
you're constantly sort of trying to undercut one another between the arena and the third party running food and beverage so both parties can make a profit. But you
Hmm.
equally have to ensure that the customers and the fans on the ground are having a high quality experience. So
Yeah.
it's such a balance, and it can actually be very complicated. Um, Taking on
I can
food and
imagine.
beverage, yeah, at an arena or at a stadium is
Yeah.
something I think I would highly recommend if the overall fan experience is very important to an organization.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a lot of work. So do
I
you have the
agree.
capacity for it?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because actually I think the last, like, what I think 10 to 15 years, I think just stadium food has taken this like complete 180 from being hot dog, burger, pretzel to
Yes,
like like 5 course meal tacos with a steak and a
totally.
cheese. Like it's like
Yeah.
is you have restaurants coming in and they actually serve like actual meals at this game instead of
Yeah.
let's go get a pretzel,
Yeah,
like,
that premium experience at a game
yeah.
too, because not a, there's a very small percentage of individuals who can actually partake in that just for
Mhm.
economic reasons. Most of the population is really just there on the concourse, buying their hot
Yeah.
dog, buying their draft beer. But there is a
Right.
whole world of private clubs and lounges and bars that, your ticket price might be all inclusive of the food in there,
Hmm.
or you might be getting an a la carte experience while you are watching the game. And there's big money on that side, and the experience is really leveled up. Most people don't even know that these spaces exist when they go to a game.
Yeah, I fully agree. And another question that I had for you was, I just wrote this down, is why are prices so high in the arena? And I think you mentioned it a little bit, is with all of the parties that are involved, is like at some point somebody has to make money. And with
Yeah.
the third party involved, the arena involved, maybe all these distributors, who makes the money? And I think that just inflates the price because somebody has to make a bottom line, right? And so,
Yeah, and it is complicated because the food and beverage side might be making money, but they might have to cover off something on the arena side, right?
hmm.
Um, it, I would say anyone working in food and beverage right now is struggling to make money. Maybe not as much as the stadiums and the arenas, but I
Yeah.
don't know that anything. And this is probably something that's just coming up with like my own age and my experience of once upon a time being somebody who loved to dine out. And now I just
Hmm.
look at the dining out experiences and I think nobody's winning here. The
Yeah.
prices are so extraordinary.
Right.
And all the restaurants can do so that they can, make ends meet is try to adjust on quality, which
Hmm.
eventually takes you out of the game because
Hmm.
customers will get onto you, or adjust the portion size. So you're probably going out for dinner and constantly hungry still after, right? You might have had a
Yeah.
great meal, but the portions were quite small.
Right.
Nobody's really winning. And I think with alcohol consumption also decreasing, especially in younger individuals right now,
Hmm.
because it's too expensive. Who can afford a $25 cocktail every time you go out?
Right.
Um, and your margins on alcohol were typically higher, so you
Hmm.
could make less money on your food and make more money on the alcohol, but now the alcohol's not selling,
Yeah.
and you still got your food costs. Wages are increasing. Arenas and
Hmm.
stadiums, they're unionized staff,
Yeah.
and that requires a pay grade that is usually higher than your minimum wage, plus all
Right.
the union dues and benefits that come with it. So it's a bit of a beast of a business.
Yeah, yeah, it made me think of a lot of things. Like when I remember when I was living in Seattle, the Northwest is such a beautiful place to live, but unfortunately, it's
Mm.
the most expensive place I've ever
Yeah.
lived. And I remember I was paying about 1,800 for a studio, and I would sit there. I'm like, okay, one paycheck is going straight to rent. How am I gonna go out and eat? Like, what if I want to go get a beer with friends and a beer is $10? So I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, well, I don't know if I can pull that like
Yeah,
constantly and
yeah.
doing
And then
that. And
people
so,
have to make life choices, right? Do I
yeah,
want to be
right.
in like a very urban,
Hmm.
um, uh, you know, busy city where lots of
Hmm.
different amenities are accessible to me, or do I want to live
Yeah,
comfortably?
right.
Those are such individual choices.
Yeah, it makes me think of, are you familiar with I think it's called the fan cost index or family cost index, one of those two. It's a measurement that takes the average price that a family of four would have to pay in order to attend a professional sporting event.
Right.
So
Yes.
that'd be like the ticket, the parking, the
Yes, yes, yes,
food.
yes. We
Like
looked
it
at
was like
that
a
in the arena for
yeah,
us often.
yeah,
We were like, what does this
yeah,
look like for a family? And then what can we
yeah,
do to support that, you know?
right,
I
yeah.
went to we're Whitecaps fans, so that's the
Mhm.
MLS team that's in Vancouver. I went to, we go to games often because our kids are really into it. And I only just discovered they have this like kids combo. And the combo is French fries, one chicken tender, and a drink and like a bottle of water. And it was $8. And I was
Okay,
like, this is fantastic. Like,
yeah,
this
that's
is
great.
super helpful for me when I had
Yeah,
just spent however many hundreds of dollars on tickets so
right.
that the kids could go see a game. And what a difference that made for me in just like my appreciation of the stadium for
Hmm.
offering that, and
Yeah.
they're a third party. So the Whitecaps,
Mm.
that's another complication. Like the Whitecaps is a separate organization and ownership group from the stadium, which is sort of government run, which has a third
Hmm.
party that does the food beverage. So, then
Yeah.
you've got three parties trying to work together.
Yeah, that's crazy. This sort of like government ownership of stadiums and teams and stuff really fascinates me, and it's really
Yeah.
interesting when third parties come in and like with taxes and like who gets the revenue and it's shared amongst things and all these things. It's just really interesting to think about, especially with food and beverage, because I think especially within sports, it's starting to become leveraged very heavily. Like
Yeah.
you mentioned, I think it a lot of people I've actually started seeing a lot of people are like blogging going to different stadiums, but not for the stadium or the game itself, but for the food.
Yes.
And they're
Yeah.
like, I got this burger at this stadium, go here for the burgers. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you're gonna pay for a $60 ticket just to buy a $30 burger.
Yeah.
So like the burger was $90. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like it's just really funny, but it's really cool because it's about the atmosphere and like what you provide and things like that. So um, I wanted to transition to the second question I had for you is like, what was the sort of everyday life of working in professional sports? And if you could give any sort of recommendations for students that want to work in that atmosphere, what would you sort of share with them?
Hmm. What was the everyday like? Well, I would say, um, I would say what's different about working for like an organization that's a professional sporting organization like the Canucks, and then trying to do a certain element of the business for it, is that you are beholden to the performance of the team. So you can only do so well selling hot dogs and beer and popcorn, so much popcorn. Um, you can only do so well based on how well the team is doing. So at some point, you almost like resign yourself to the fact that I can't get more people in the door with my food and beverage. It's a captive audience. You have to want to come see a team to buy the ticket. And if not enough of you want to come see the team and buy the ticket, like what is probably happening with the Canucks this season, is you won't sell enough food. And then at the same time, you're not making the profit on ticket sales, on merch sales, on food sales. And yet you can't suddenly start skimping on the fan experience. Otherwise, they're going to be mad at you for everything. So you have to do so much more work when the team is not performing well. And when the team is performing well, half the time they won't care if your beer is warm, which, we did a good job of not selling warm beer.
Yeah. Priority number one.
Huge priority. Those
Yeah.
draft tap lines were clean and cold.
That's good.
But you end up hustling so much more. It's like that for every business. When the business isn't doing well, you hustle so much more. You have to be so much more creative. You get fewer resources to do that with. When business is going well, and you just let it roll. And so it really, I think, is about when business is going well and you're letting it roll, how are you setting yourself up for success for what might happen in a future season? How are you establishing routines? How are you building out efficiencies? How are you ensuring that, because it could change in a year. In one season, the team can be great, and the next season, a team can take a nosedive, right?
Right.
You have to be able to provide a consistent level of service, regardless of the ups and downs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That makes me, again, that's making me think of the example of the Cardinals I just said. Like when business is not good, do you just start giving stuff away? Like, do you just start making it be a buffet? I think and it's really funny is actually when you watch games, like basically almost the whole stadium is empty, but the specific section that you have to sit in to get those tickets are usually packed. It's like a $25 ticket and you get all this free stuff. So like one section of the stadium is
or are you better off doing that when it is full? Right. And create that goodwill all the time, as opposed to, because as soon as you start doing something like this when the team is tanking, everyone sees through it. Everyone knows why you're doing it. And I don't know that you've created a brand loyalty based on that. But it's so hard. Like you don't want to give away the farm when the team is doing well, and people will be willing to contribute based on that, right?
Yeah, I agree. That's something I really hope that they decide to keep. If and when the team starts to do well, or just any other team out there that's thinking of doing that they continue it and it remains a thing. Is there anything you'd sort of recommend to students that want to work in pro sports? Like what is maybe one takeaway that you could give advice to the potential student looking to work in professional sports here in the future?
I don't know that I've got an advice that relates to professional sports, but I think anytime someone asks me this question, like what's the one kind of nugget that you can give me about my working career? And you sort of touched on it in the beginning where you said it was like funny how like my roles and my jobs sort of just kept on evolving.
Mm-hmm.
The approach I think I have always taken in life, and I really wish a lot of younger people would adopt, is just be really good where you are. And I mean really good right where you are. If you're hired to do a job, even if your job is just to answer phones, be the best person who has ever answered phones at the business. And stop actually asking for, I'm going to answer phones for these 6 months, but what will happen after that? Because until you've achieved excellence in one place, how can you even begin to ask for the next step? You can have that in the back of your mind, but anytime you are just great at what you've been hired to do, you will find capacity you will suddenly be somebody who's so good at answering phones that you can do it in half the time um, as someone else. And then you've got more space to take on something new. Your managers, your seniors, your leadership team will notice when you are excellent where you are, more so than when you are constantly pining for the next thing. Um, yeah, I think if any,
Yeah.
like, if you want to work in sports, sure, go find a sports organization and keep applying. But at the same time, like, if you haven't gotten a job there yet, be great where you are, continue to get your promotions, continue to be recognized, and then build up your resume. And by the time you see a job that you actually want to go after yourself, you will be more ready and more desirable for it.
Yeah, I really like that with you said be an expert in one sort of domain. Be an expert in that area, be really good in that domain, and I wrote down have an identity. That's something that relates a lot to PhD students and research,
Mm,
because a lot of students, it relates to a lot with what you said is, normally when you're at a younger age, you kind of want to dip your toes into a lot of different pools.
yeah.
And you want to be known as somebody that can be diverse, somebody that can reach for the stars and be good at everything. But at some point, like you said, when managers look at you, you're like, okay, well, you're good at everything, but I need somebody really good at this one thing. I need somebody that's really good doing this. And you're like, well, I can do that, but I can also do 50 other things. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
it's really interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think there are individuals who are specialists and there are individuals who are
Yeah.
generalists, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All I'm really suggesting is, and you could be either one of these things, all I'm suggesting is whatever your job is, just be really good at your job. And your job might require you to do 50 different things. Be great at those 50 different things. But if it's in the confines of your job, be good at it and be humble about it. More than anything else, we have that as a value at Pedalheads, to be humble. And whenever I meet new staff and I kind of go over what our mission, vision, values are, I really I harp on that, right? We have we're running a $40 million business here at Pedalheads. We operate across North America. We are a busy professional group. But if I go to camp, yeah, I am wiping snot off of a 3-year-old's face, and I am lying in the gravel, and I am doing sidewalk chalk. And I've got my bike and my helmet on me because we get down and we just do the work and we are not above it. And the expectation is the same for everyone. It's like, if you're walking past your office and there's a piece of garbage on the floor, are you the person that goes and picks it up, or are you the person that walks past it? Do you
Yeah.
unload the dishwasher at your office kitchen, or do you just wait for the office administrator to do it?
Right. That's love. I love that. It's so beautiful. And that's one thing that I sort of realized, I think, growing up is I heard, what was this phrase? I think it's do as I say and not as I do.
Yeah.
And I sort of got, I've realized what type of manager that I like and what type of manager I don't. I like managers like what you're suggesting, is the ones that are humble and they get into the work with you.
Yes.
And they don't
Yeah.
just sit back and they're like, do as I say, but don't do what I do. Don't just sit back and
Yeah.
do nothing. Go and do everything, but I can sit back and do nothing. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's something that I really resonate with. It's like, I think it's very powerful for managers and just employees everywhere to just be involved with everything, and sort of just have the availability and the desire to want to do it,
Mhm.
and not just be told to always do it. I think that like moves mountains and it's really impactful. So um, I wanted to transition the conversation a bit to your current role at Pedalheads, and you touched on it a little bit. You said that a recruiter reached out to you to apply to this role as the COO at Pedalheads, and I'm just curious. Can you talk a little bit about the transition of working in the NHL to now being an executive at, you said, a $40 million company? What sort of was the transition like, and what's like a day in the life in your position?
Yeah. I mean, the transition was reasonably simple. I think like the food and beverage business at the Canucks was its own sort of siloed business. We worked with other departments, especially with the sponsorship team, quite a bit. But I was just in charge of this one area. At Pedalheads, you're kind of in charge of everything.
Mm.
um, And so there's a little bit of a learning curve there in terms of going, okay, it's not just my one silo with a whole bunch of other senior leaders of other areas that I work in partnership with. At this point here, it was you have a bunch of senior leaders, but you have to sit on top of it all and make sure that they're all unified. So that was a bit of a shift for me. And I would say Pedalheads was in a bit of a different state of business. The Canucks was quite a well-run machine, and after 8 years of food and beverage, we really knew what we were doing over there. Pedalheads is also a very well-run machine, but they had a really significant growth in 2021, and I came in the year after, where they basically had a summer in 2021 where it was so explosive and busy for them post-COVID that they went, we can't keep running the way we've been running, which is a bit more ad hoc, a bit more like freestyling of a few things, and they needed structure. And boy, do I love structure.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, do you feel like in your role right now, does the previous accountant of you like that structured system, like accounting, like, plug and
Very
chug,
much so.
does that help in your in the day in life for you?
I mean, it really helps me, and I think
Yeah.
I'd like to think it's helped the organization. I think um, we have really been able to build in systems and procedures and routine. In such a way that we can reliably launch camps. I think you would be very happy, and I'm not taking credit for Seattle by any means. That team is doing excellent, but I think you would feel a difference if you came back to the Seattle team
Yeah,
and saw
that's
how
cool.
smoothly they launch. They have
Yeah.
had some really great launches over these last couple of years where it doesn't feel like a scramble, where they've actually been able to walk out of a summer saying that was a really fun summer, versus one that was just like constantly in a stress mode and in a period of chaos. My structured approach, I think, works for some and not others. It
Hmm.
really depends on the style. And I think it's really helpful to the business in some ways. And I have to watch it myself when it comes to the business in other ways. Not everything has to be um, dialed in and structured and routine. Some things can be more spontaneous. So I have to catch myself on those fronts too.
Yeah, it's really cool. I was wondering if you could illustrate like a day in the life. Obviously, I'm sure all days are different, but
Yeah.
just generally speaking, like you show up to the office, what does the day just like generally look like for you?
Yeah, it's a lot of meetings, which I don't always love. It's a lot of meetings with various departments, whether it's, bike operations, swim operations, soccer operations, or finance, IT, HR, marketing, programs and
Hmm.
training, people and culture with HR. Um, I end up having to do a lot of um, I end up having to come in for fires. That
Hmm.
takes up, that's like 40% of every day is like some like the newest problem. I'd say I allocate like, probably 30% of the day to like routine items, things that I just want to make sure I move along. And then there are parts of the day where I just want to get some nitty gritty work done, and I have to be able to allocate space for that.
Hmm.
Um, like you mentioned earlier about getting into the work, doing the work. I probably have a nastier habit of doing that and
Hmm.
should get out of trying to do it and be in it with every individual. And should be able to coach and delegate more, but sometimes we are
Hmm.
in such a time crunch, and I'm like, I could just get this done for you in like 20 minutes, and it might take you an hour, and that's not a good use of your time or my waiting. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
um,
great. I was really curious when you said that a lot of meetings are most of the meetings scheduled months in advance, because I'm curious, like now with my role as a PhD student, I'm realizing that I used to go like day of with a lot of my life systems and calendar
yeah,
scheduling and stuff. I'm like, oh, today's this day. I'm good. I'll figure out tomorrow's schedule tomorrow. But like now I'm like, crap, I'm about a week, almost 2 weeks in advance at this point. So I'm curious, is like, does your schedule look a bit more like maybe a month in advance, and you're more so scheduling a month out, and it's just like getting further and
Yeah, I mean,
further?
there's always space for the meeting that has to happen in
Mm-hmm.
the day.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I would say I'm a huge proponent of scheduling 3 to 6 months in advance. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
our leadership
Wow.
meetings are on a routine. It's every Tuesday, 10 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And if 3 months from now we have a registration day on that Tuesday, it'll shift from 11 to 1 instead. And we
Mm-hmm.
look at it. If I have to remember something, like I did it earlier today, I was in a meeting and I was like, okay, this is something we have to think about. Now is not the right time to think about it. We probably need to think about it in September. I scheduled the
Mm-hmm.
meeting now for September. I can't forget it that way, right? Just lives in
Yeah.
my calendar. I put as many notes in there as I can so that we remember it, and that we don't miss out on it. But I think that's really like my job as a COO. And I explain this to other tiers. When you're on the ground operating, like if you're back in Seattle running those
Mm-hmm.
sites, yeah, I think your job is really about these next like 2 to 6 weeks, because you got stuff you're doing, right? And then that manager above you is kind of looking at that, 6 to 12 weeks out. And the manager above them is probably going to that 12 weeks to, 6 to 8 months. And my job is to be thinking about, I should be thinking about next year now.
Yeah, that's really cool, and it's really interesting to me, just like scheduling systems and how teams schedule and when and how. And I like I said, I used to think that people would schedule stuff day of, and my thought would be like, well, if you schedule a meeting 6 months in advance, how do you know that you're going to have the time, the space, capacity? You're going to be in a different. How do you know in 6 months that everybody's schedules are going to align? But I think the beauty of it is I think it actually helps to create that sort of cohesion amongst teams. Is like, okay, well, I can then take 6 months to think about this, and then once we meet in 6 months, we'll be hopefully all on the same page and have talked about this for half a year.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
I
it's a
think
really cool
we are
thing.
no different than what has been understood about children.
Hmm.
Little kids thrive in routines. Little kids thrive in predictability. That's why so many of like the education system and the programming for especially preschoolers is all about routine, right? Let them be able to understand what to expect. Why are adults any different? Most adults, I think, are happier having some sense of what's ahead. Some people don't work like that. Some people are really like, I just want to fly by the seat of my pants, right? But when you are running an organization and you have to launch 350 locations all at the same time every year, really, I think over time, you come to recognize that question you asked about, how do you know that your schedules will all be in sync? You know, because that's how it's been for however many years. Your
Right.
schedules usually are like this. So you don't need to know at 100%, but can you say with 70% confidence that, yeah, it's probably going to be fine?
Yeah,
You
right. And
can,
if it isn't, it'll
you'll
change and
adapt.
you'll still meet. Yeah, and you'll still
Yeah.
meet. So, and it'll just be fine. Um, I wanted to ask a general question. What is the primary sort of goal or objective of the COO? And my thought,
Mm,
like the marketer's primary goal is to market. Obviously, the
yeah.
accountant's primary job is to control the books. Audit the books, all these things, keep the company financially afloat. But in terms of like executive roles, I feel like I see all these CEO positions, COO positions, but I'm like, what does that mean? Like what is
Yeah.
it that is the primary goal? And I'm curious, like if you could illustrate, like what would be the primary goal, just in generally speaking, of a COO?
I would say is for the chief operating officer, it is to be able to operate with excellence and run excellent operations. And to me, what that means is a high quality product or service um, that is effectively launched and followed through on for the entire customer experience. And that's, to me, it's not really possible to do that for the customer unless all of your internal internal departments are running that same way, with routine, with structure, with process. Um, and that sounds really stifling, but the whole purpose of doing that is so that you basically can lay down train tracks where the train can keep going. And then when something happens, if there's a derailing, you can deal with it because the rest of the operation is just still going to truck along. When everything is in chaos and going everywhere, you can't even deal with the newest fire. But if you can establish stability and routine beneath you, a foundation of that, then you'll be able to deal with the ad hoc things. And there's an ad hoc thing every day, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's always something that's going to happen that you never thought of.
Yeah.
Always something that'll happen that'll try to derail those tracks.
Yeah.
But I think having those systems priorly in place will help that derailment to go back on track. And
well,
so
most things are predictable.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Most
Yeah.
things are predictable. So deal with them. Deal with them in advance.
Exactly. Yeah. Put systems in place for the what ifs. I really enjoy thinking hypothetically of the what ifs because then you can create a structured system for if ever happens, you already have a plan in place to address it. And I feel like some I think the counter argument to that is like, well, we don't know the what ifs and the what ifs are unknown. So how do I know to plan and do this thing if we don't know if it's going to happen? And I don't know if I agree with that sort of thought process because if it can happen, it will. I think that's Murphy's law.
Yeah.
So like if anything can happen at some point, it will. And in terms of just working with kids and running events and sports and things like that, something is going to happen. Something will happen. It's bound to happen.
Yeah, it's riding the fine line of
Right.
of knowing what level of detail you're going to go into with that, right? Do I need to know that someone will trip over a cable and then there will be a syringe that is nearby in the bush that they actually land on? Like, no.
Yeah.
But do I know that if there are hazards on a site, something could happen? Yes.
Right.
How do I just deal with hazards on a site? You know, like
Right.
don't get down to that granularity, but be able to give enough scope to it that you can actually have meaningful actions taking.
Right. I agree. And I think taking that bird's eye view of just problems and instead of thinking of like the pinpointed issue, you'd look at maybe the overarching issue, the overarching problem. And you're like, all right, well, we know, hazards occur. How do we deal with hazards? What's our program systems for handling hazards? And then from there, you can get nitty gritty for when those hazards occur. You can have specific programs for that. So I think that's a wonderful piece of advice and intuition there. I'm curious. I wanted to ask a question about the relationship that your company has with AI, and if you guys are using it. Do you guys use it for programming, or does it help with? I'm sure because I'm familiar with all the applicants that you guys get in and all the interviews that occur, all these things. I know with ADP, the new system that y'all ran out a few years back. And I'm just curious, like, do you guys use AI like administratively to maybe help sift through some data? Or I'm just curious, do you guys
formally? We don't formally use it. We are exploring it.
Yeah, that's cool.
I use it every day in some way, shape, or form. Mostly for efficiency for some pieces. I was trying to, and it's impossible to avoid, truly.
Right.
I was trying to build some sort of a Power Automate function in Microsoft Office yesterday. And I was like, interesting. There's basically an AI like paint by number here where I just ask it a question. It gives me my next step. And, I could teach myself how to run a Power Automate if I wanted to. I didn't have enough time to go through it and it was starting to become a wormhole. So you have to pull yourself out of wormholes.
Right.
I think, I don't know, AI is so hard. I would like to integrate it more formally, but only in the right places. And I think it'll take time for us to figure out what those right places are.
I agree with that. And I'm curious, would you ever, in terms of like interviewing staff, would you ever ask an individual how they use AI so that maybe in the future you could create those sort of formal relationships with it? Or would that ever sort of occur? Like if an applicant applies, would you ever, if they're in the final like stages of a interview, would you ever ask them like, do you have experience with AI and do you know how it works? All these things,
Yeah,
like would
I
that
mean,
ever?
I think that would come up with specific roles where I think there's a lot of opportunity for it. Um, to me, it's less about the opinion of AI and more the efficiency of it. Um, I don't trust an AI opinion. I think
Mhm.
I think you have to be very careful about discerning what's truth and what isn't, because I've seen it myself where I'm like, I don't think that's true. And then you know do your own research and you go, yeah, I don't know where Chat GPT decided that that was gospel, but it's not.
Yeah.
Um, and you have to be such a scrutinizing individual to do that because they're tricky. They word it well. Um, so I think it would depend on functions. I think workflows could probably really benefit from AI, where if we have people just doing clicks and
Mhm.
clicks are easy to make mistakes on. Individuals are not perfect. Their time might be better spent doing like an analysis that I wouldn't trust AI to do versus the clicks. So how can AI help me with efficiency on that part?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I agree. You said AI is almost impossible to avoid because like now with every internet domain you use, Chrome, Safari, whatever, they have their own AI built in. So even if you
Mhm.
like do a Google search, AI, it's like Gemini's AI will pop up and it'll give you the answer. And so like
Yeah,
no matter where you go, every website has this, hi, I'm Bob, the virtual AI chatbot or whatever. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
like
yeah.
every company has something. So it's like you said, it's unavoidable. And even with
You could
Excel,
try to avoid it, but I think you're
yeah.
just going to do a detriment to yourself, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
everyone else will adopt it at some point.
Yeah.
So you want to be real behind or just,
Yeah.
behind due to scrutinizing reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really interesting. And I agree with the like with if the efficiency of it, because I've used it in terms of Excel, because like
Yeah,
there are some things in Excel that I'm just like, this is very monotonous for me to like copy data into other things and sort of like make it pretty. But
yeah,
I could just really go into the Excel AI and be like, hey, do this to make it pretty. And it goes,
yeah.
all right, poof, and it
There
just
you
does
go.
it. And I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
that's great.
So much time saved, which
Yeah,
I
and
think
it
is
saved me.
problematic in and of itself, right? I
Yeah,
just think a
right.
lot of the a lot of mental health issues are probably due to the volume of transactions that we're processing in our brains these days, which we never used to
Hmm.
have to.
Right.
So AI is just adding to that, just means that we can do more in less time. But are we
Yeah.
built for that? I don't know. Sometimes I don't think
Yeah.
my brain is.
I agree. Yeah. That's so interesting. That's a great take. And I've never actually thought of it like that. And I do agree though, because now maybe the more things we can do, the more prompts you can put into AI, the more efficient we become. But then the more efficient you become, the more people are in demand from you. And like, will you live
Mhm.
up to? And so it's just like, I don't know, AI is so efficient, but then it's going to demand us to be efficient. And so it's almost like a double-edged, almost counterintuitive thing there.
Yeah, and I really
Um,
worry about young people. I really worry about
yeah.
people coming out of university trying to get those entry level jobs, which are probably starting to be eroded because why do I need this 21-year-old to click for me? I can get a computer to
Hmm.
do that,
Right.
right? And faster and better, unfortunately, with some of these tasks.
Hmm.
And I think the job market for youth employment is already such a struggle for many people that I worry about the future for my kids. Like, how are they going to get a job?
Right. I agree. And yeah, like I was thinking of the first job that I had when I worked at the city of Memphis. I was like programming sports. And we all did it by hand. And I'm like, at one point that job will become obsolete because you could just
Yeah,
have, as a manager, you could just use AI to program the sports for you. So what's the point of hiring a $40,000 employee to just have
yeah,
Chat GPT do it for you for free,
yeah.
basically, or for
Yeah, for
10 bucks a month?
$40 a month.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. $40 a month. Yeah, it's really funny. Um, I wanted to ask. I have a couple more questions left for our episode here. I was curious, what does obviously you don't have to go into specifics here, but I'm curious, like generally speaking, what do you think the future looks like for Pedalheads? I know you guys just launched the soccer programming. I'm curious, is there generally speaking, is there anything you guys are looking to do, expand, or anything like that in the future?
I think we're always looking to expand to other regions, but I think with the ones that we're in right now, there is still so much opportunity.
Hmm.
We haven't scratched the surface of the DMV area or the Massachusetts area. We are just launching in Minnesota this
Hmm.
summer with just a couple of small little sites. California is just, it's just ripe. It's just like
Yeah.
you could expand everywhere within one region. So
Hmm.
as opposed to going too wide, go deep, trying to really sink into the regions that we're in and grow the base there.
Hmm.
Also, because again, it's more efficient to have
Yeah.
tons of people going to one camp than operate 15 different camps with the same number of customers.
Yeah. That's great. Do you ever feel that Pedalheads will expand outside of North America at some point? I know it's very far down the road, but
Yeah,
like
I think
obvious
we've
hypothetical
always
here, but
wanted to. I mean, it's a part of our mission statement, right?
hmm.
Or a vision statement actually right now. Um, it's not in an immediate plan. I think we'd love to, but again, there's so much opportunity and work right here in front of
Right.
us that I think it's smarter for us to stay put.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think with just the amount of land that's in North America, that you could grow more internally. And I really agree. I think California is very ripe. You can literally go almost anywhere in that
Yeah,
state, and people will want to learn how to ride their bikes and
yeah,
be better at it and stuff like that. So I think that's really cool and interesting. Really cool to hear. The final two questions is the positives, sort of the positives of being an executive, and maybe
yeah.
like the negatives. Is there any, like, generally 10,000 foot view? Generally speaking, what's like a positive of working as an executive, and then what might be a negative?
Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody who really likes variety, there's tons of that at a senior level because you're not sort of isolated in a single scope area. Um, you feel a lot of autonomy, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm able to go, oh, these are the things that are really important to me right now, so I really want to dig into them, and I can. I don't have to go through a whole bunch of chains. I mean, I work very closely with the owner, and she really provides the majority of that strategic direction, and then I add my perspective on it, because when you have an entrepreneur versus a detailed operator, like the two things could clash, but I think we work really well on how do we make her, bright, beautiful visions come to life in a smooth and effective way.
Hmm.
Um, you just get to be a part of more than just the day to day. You get to think into the future. So I think that that's sort of the funnest part about it. Um,
That's great. Yeah.
the hardest parts, the scope and the detail and the you can ride on the successes, but if you're going to take the successes, you also have to take the failures.
Hmm.
Like if any one area didn't go well, even if I felt like I had not a lot to do with it, it's still my fault. It is
Hmm.
still in some way, shape, or form from my direction. Um, and and so taking that risk all the time of having to be the one who was wrong um, is just a part of it. And you just got to be
Yeah.
okay with it. It's like, ooh,
Yeah.
really messed that one up. Sorry,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
um,
That's, yeah. Time to move on and on to the next one. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you ride the highs and you ride the lows.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit and speak with me. I really hope people enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciated it.
Oh, you're welcome, Nathan. This was fun.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.